This is an example of some filleting, and the question is, how do we get this to align? First of all, I'm just going to create a new list, and I'll just put the stuff that we are interested in, which is just this area here in that list, and we can then remove the rest of it. So I'll put that in another list. Probably did that round the wrong way, but never mind. Okay, so we're just looking in here. Also notice that you get these light symbols here, which you don't actually need. So I'm just going to toggle those off. They're just interfering in our view. So this looks really good. Everything's aligned apart from those two ends. Now the big, oh no, I've just spotted something. There's only position here. So let's go and have a look at that first of all. And then I'm going to go into the information window, and I've got a hotkey of I here to save me a bit of time. So if it just says P and I want to find out what the tangency is, I can actually go into here. So tangency wise it's okay, it's just the locator there wasn't quite correct. Now I'm wondering if that's curvature aligned. It isn't. So there's nothing wrong with that if that's what you wanted. So if you want tangency there, that's fine. And I noticed that these fillets are tangent aligned. Again, there's nothing wrong with that at all if that's what's required. When you're running a fillet over another fillet, you will find that if this is only tangent, so you're running this edge across a tangent edge here, then you will have much more difficulty trying to get that to align than if that was curvature aligned, or if it was G3, it would be even easier. It seems counterintuitive, and it's when I started filleting many years ago, or surfacing many years ago, I used to think that if things were tangent, surely that's easier than G2, but it's actually the reverse. So if you have a choice in the matter, if you can make that G2, that would be so much better, because then you won't have so much of an alignment problem going across here. So we'd expect these to be all tangent around here, which they are, and we've got curvature alignment on the ends. Now when you get to this end here, if we can get tangency there, we'll be lucky. And even if this is G2, you'll often find in this situation that you can only get G1 across that end, and as long as the highlights look reasonably okay, then it's okay. I mean, here, because we've got tangency only, if I go into the highlights here, let's put those ones on, and I'll just reduce the number of repeats, so we've got a few less lines. You'll see that because we've only got tangency, we won't get continuity of the curvature across this boundary or the highlights. That's not wrong, it's just that that's a feature of it being tangent continuous. If it was G2 continuous, we'd expect that to flow across. You can see the same thing here. The highlights will come in and they'll go off at a different angle, and that's why often you want G2 continuity. But it all depends on the size of the geometry and lots of other factors, like who your boss is and what they want you to do, basically. So I'm going to persevere with this, but just to let you know, this is going to be difficult. So I'm making my excuses in advance, but this is a very difficult situation. In fact, it's probably going to be impossible to get tangency across there, and the reason is partly because we've got tangency only on the edges, and like I say, if there's G2 everywhere, we're more likely to be able to get tangency there, but G2 is unlikely. But the other thing that's happening here is that this edge comes along here and then goes off at a different angle. Again, it's sometimes unavoidable, and in this case it may well be unavoidable because we're coming in at quite a shallow angle here. If we had more of an angle on there, then what I would say is that we should actually make this edge flow into this one, so we could make that go across. In fact, that's probably going to be the only solution where we're going to be able to align that. Now if I just want to try, I mean, I'll try and align this, and I hold out very little hope of doing that. One other thing that we can do is, you notice the degree along this way is only 5, which is what the fillet function gives you. Now if you want to, we can increase the degree to 7. That's usually the limit on what we're allowed to do. Now I'm using Alt and D here, very worthwhile knowing, because you can go up here and change the degree, but I can also do it here. I can never see, or very rarely see, the symbols, but there is a a U and a V symbol, I can just about make it out there. So I think the U direction's that way, which is this one. But I can't always see it, so I just guess which one it is. If I'm wrong, it doesn't matter, I can just undo it. So first of all, increase the degree, and also hit the space bar. That would be very useful. Hit the space bar, and then we're just going to try and align that, and I don't think it's going to work. But when I align it, obviously it's only G1. That's the maximum I'm anticipating being able to do. Very unlikely. You wouldn't get G2. You wouldn't be able to get G2 on this situation. You might if these were G2. If they were G3, I would expect to get G2 across there. But here we're going to go for G1. If we can get G1, then I'd be more than happy. So we're going for G1. We're going for edge because it's edge to edge here. If you put project on by mistake, then what happens is you create a curve on surface there, right on the edge of the surface, which you do not want. So always have edge on. Align is a really tricky function. You have to always keep your wits about you as to what you've got, what settings you've got. So edge. So I'm going to go and align that into there, and you can see that it's aligned it, and actually it's kept the alignment on that edge, which is good. But on here, it's thrown it off completely. Now the other thing is to make absolutely certain that these CVs join up with the CVs on here. I need to put position influence of 1 on. I mean, it won't make any difference here. It looks like they're actually a bang on anyway. And the other thing is that you tend to get a better alignment when you've got edge on, which I've got on here, or you've got it edge align in here, because that's the angle is about 1 degree there. What I could try doing is changing that edge into skew. So you can see it says start there and it says end there. So in this menu, I can go to skew, or I can do it here. I can click on that there, just in case that makes any difference. It's not made any difference, so I'm not going to worry about that. I'll just keep it on edge align. Now, obviously we've got no alignment there, and so what I'm going to do is pick that surface. Now that surface hasn't been trimmed, so we've got a curve on surface there that we can delete. So I'm going to delete that, and then I'm going to try again. I don't hold out much hope of this at all, but I'm going to go for G1, and I want to align it into this surface here. So this is where we would use project, and I'll use project into the view in this case. So it's going to move those CVs only in and out of the view, and then I'm going to try and align it that way. And you can see immediately it changes the degree that way, which is what I was expecting it to do, to be honest. So it's actually made it a lot worse. Now one thing you could try here is increasing the degree, because you can see that makes it more localized, and I can go up to degree 7 if I want to. So these surfaces here where you're going across this edge, that might be another possibility, is that we could do that. I don't really like that, because obviously it doesn't really show the intent of that surface. That, you know, having that as degree 3 is quite clear that it's tangent. Even without the symbols on, it must be tangent on both sides. That's all it can be. If it's degree 5, you know it's going to be probably G2 on both sides, even without the analysis on there. This one, we no idea, because it's a higher degree. So I don't really like doing this, but sometimes it's just what you have to do. And I still don't have that much hope that this is going to work either, but I'm going to try this. So I'm going to line it that way with project on, and then I'm going to go back to this edge, and you're often going backwards and forwards between edges, and I'm going to align that again. So notice I haven't got history on. If you have history on, it makes things worse in this case. So here I'm going to do this. I'm going to try and align it in tangent, but I'm going to put vector on and hold it in the view, in the hope that that would be better. But actually it's no better. In fact, it's worse than when I had that as degree 3. Again, I'm not surprised with this at all. So I'm going to go back to degree 3. Actually, I'm going to just revert, which means I take it back to where it was. Then I'm going to come out of the function. I'm going to drop that down to degree 3. Sorry, that's the wrong one. That degree 5 and this one degree 3. Now it's gone off there, but it doesn't matter, because what I need to do, let's get rid of that curve on surface again, and we'll get rid of that curve on surface as well. So the other option that we've got I mean, I'm avoiding at the moment making that edge flow, but that's the best solution in a way. But I want to try and use a sort of sledgehammer approach, which is what this is. When it comes off at that angle, this is a sledgehammer to try and fix this. So we're going to try and detach this and make this a smaller fillet. So do something like that. Again, it's not very nice, and you will find when you look at this that these CVs, if I do get this to align by some miracle, the CVs here will be quite horrible going across that boundary, and the highlights will be quite horrible, but at least it will align. And so let's just try and do that again. So I'm going to start off by, let's align this end first of all. So I'll make sure I've got edge on, I've got position influence of 1 on because I'm edge to edge here, and I haven't got history on. And then we're going to align that end to there. Now this, I'll explain what has happened there. On this end, this surface here, we can make that degree 7, and we should do, because we'll need every single CV that we can get around the area to get this to work. Now what's happened on this end is, because I've used detach and I had a locator on the end already, it's now getting, the system is confused. So it thinks there's a position that this end and this end are connected, which of course they're not, which is why we've got a ridiculous display here. It's saying the position, if we can find what the gap is, it says 0.6 of a mil. So this is tiny geometry, but it's saying the gap between there and there is 0.6 of a mil. We're not interested, and it's just because we've used detach. It always happens like this. It's not intelligent enough to actually know that we've detached it and that it should update the curvature here. So what I'm going to do there is put the curvature analysis on there, just so we can see that that's still continuous. I know these edges, we haven't got a curve on surface there, so we need to go and align those. So I'm going to do the one that should be fairly easy. So I'm going to have G1 project in the view, that one there, and this one here. So that should all be fine. So now we've reduced the problem to this area. So I'm going to go back to edge. So we've got to be on our, have our wits about us as to what's going on here. So we've got to have edge here, not project, otherwise this will fail. So at most I'm going to try and get tangency. If I can get tangency, then we could probably actually, on that one, curvature would be no problem. It's this one's going to be the problem. That's only going to get tangency. So on these edges, again, I've got to make sure I'm picking all the right options in here. It's not easy. So we're going to project that one onto this surface here. That one is no problem because it's not going across an angled edge. And so this one, let's see if that one works. That's even worse than when we started. And what we could try there, so I've got project on with view on. Okay, yeah, so let's go back to this edge. Now this will be very sensitive to these CVs, you can imagine, because this is such a small distance here. The tiniest movement of those CVs will affect that edge. So let's try G1 on that edge. In case you're wondering that this seems like a very long-winded method, it is, and there's no way around this. This is how it does things. And whenever you've got an angle coming off like that, this is what's going on. But the good news is we're now down to 0.25 of a degree on this edge here. So we have reduced it significantly. We can also try just increasing the degree. So I'm going to put history on here because then it'll, with auto update on, because then as I do this, it should update. Although it's actually, no, it's not going to have any effect, of course, is it? So on this edge. So I'm just going to go for, let's just go for 7, degree 7. Because there's every chance that we'll need degree 7. If we don't, we can just back off that a bit. Now, so we've just got this 0.25. Now, usually, if I delete that curve on surface, this is the way to do it. Usually, is to delete the curve on surface and then to use project again. If you don't delete the curve on surface, then you end up with multiple curves on surfaces, and then you get confused about what's actually going on here. Now that's not actually helped there. We could try changing the projection type. That's marginally helped, but not very much. So normal is just doing it normal to the surface locally there. Now that hasn't helped here. So what I'm going to now try and do is, what we could do is make this surface here even smaller. Let's go into locator. So with I've gone into locator. Sorry, I didn't explain what I was doing, but I've clicked on I to get to the information window, which if you don't know where that is, it's under Windows information window. But if you make it a hotkey I, it's just so easy to get to, and it's so useful. Now on this edge here, so I've picked this lower edge here. I want to see what the tangency is doing. So I've got this scale option here. I'm going to leave that alone for the time being, but if I go into transforming my CVs, again, I've got this on a hotkey C in my case. So if I don't tell you what I'm doing, it's under here, Control Panel, Transform CV. So if I click on C and then press the space bar, I get the function up. So I'm going to put on lots of mouse sensitivity, and I'm going to move CVs normal to the surface, and I'm probably going to have a lot more than that. Let's go for 1000 as my mouse sensitivity. Now if I click on this point here, that's going to affect tangency that way, and also here. You can see the worst tangency on this end is here. This is the problem, that this trying to align it in this direction is affecting that point, trying to align it in this direction is also affecting that point, and the two are battling each other. So let's see what we can do if I manually move that. Can I keep this green? It won't. It's definitely not going to happen. It starts to go. It starts to deviate there. But if I get, maybe if I get the angles about the same on both sides. So I can't move that point anymore. It's affecting that side, and I'm about the midpoint of the two. So I'm going to move along to the next one, which will also influence that, but by a lesser amount, and I might be able to get rid of some of that angle. But of course, what then happens is I take it to a point where it starts to move up here. So you then end up going to the next point, and it's a bit like trying to sculpt a balloon, where you push one bit of the balloon and another bit of the balloon pops up. Now you can see that's pretty tricky to do, and I actually haven't got this with intolerance, but we could also go along this end. So I can't move that point because that's a common point and I want to keep that where it is. This way I could also adjust that, and then I find that I've got to push that back in there. This is what I mean about these corners in terms of the CVs. You'll find that even if I manage to do this, I mean, the other thing is you could say in these corners, I'm just going to accept the fact that there is an angle mismatch in terms of the tolerance that we're working to, and in these corners that'll be acceptable. That would just be a decision for either your conscience or your manager. So I'm just going to see if we can get it below. But of course, usually the answer is no, you can't. You're not allowed to cheat in these corners. In reality, of course, if you were to machine this, you probably wouldn't see any difference if it was 0.1 as opposed to 0.05, but you have to have standards, of course. So I'm basically working along that hull that way, and that one that way. So the first two along that way. Now I'm going to try and get rid of this bubble in the corner if I can. Maybe I can just pull that one. So I'm ignoring the bubble that's going along there because it's easier to get rid of that one. Okay, let's just, well, I should say that. Hopefully it's easier to get rid of, But you can see my CVs, probably even from this distance, are going a bit crazy now. And this is what happens. Plus it actually is more difficult than I thought. Also, we've got to be careful. We can't move that point because it'll... Well, we could move that point if we accept that that's only going to be tangent, which would be fine, to be honest. Then we can move that point. But if you want to keep that curvature, of course, you've got to avoid the first 3 CVs. You can only move this one. It's the last one you can move. So it becomes very problematic. So I think if I spent another hour or 2, I might be able to get that to work. I'm not going to even bother to try the other one because it's the same principle. Now, as I say, the other thing we could do is just make this even smaller. So if this wasn't working, which I might say I might give up at this point. I'm dangerously close. It's less than 0.1 of a degree here. But if I really have given up on this now, it's too much manual effort, then what we could do is just ideally go back to the original surface, or we could, if we wanted to, let me just save this somewhere. So I'll just call it thread 01. So if we've got to that point and we thought, oh, I can't be bothered to do this anymore, this is not working, what we could do is extend this backwards, so I'm using extend here, and then we can extend this. Obviously the diagnostic there isn't then right. Also the curve on surface here, we've got a curve on surface which goes across from here to here, not very easy to see. If I put edit points on the curve on surface, you can see there's an edit point there and one there. So we actually want to get rid of that. And we also want to get rid of this one because they're not. It doesn't line up with the edges that we've got. And we've also got overlapping edges, which I've done deliberately because I want to trim one back to the other, or trim convert it. So let's go into surface edit, and I'm going to do a trim convert. This one, project in the view, or normal, doesn't matter. So we've trim converted that, so we've got a new surface there. Now the chances are that won't be entirely aligned now. So I'm just going to go for tangency there. Oh, again, on this side, we've got a curve on surface which only goes to that point. So it's really important that we get rid of these old curves on surface. Otherwise you end up with multiple ones which are really not very good. Thinking about it, this needs to be curvature, doesn't it? That's what we were working with. So I'm using the information window there just to change it. So we haven't got a curve on surface there, here or here. Now I've just trim converted that back to that edge. So I've just made this smaller. So again, so that hopefully we'll be able to align that. Let's go into surface continuity here. See if that's got curvature. Very unlikely. So I'm going to first of all align these edges here. So let's go into align, and this is going to be G2, project in the view, that one. I've left curvature on, so we've got all sort of dubious analysis going on there, which obviously we don't want. We want it on G1 only. See, all of these things you've got to remember all of the time, which is a tall order. It's not easy to do. Again, this one's G1 into those edges there, and then I'm going to use edge on here and align that with curvature that side. So this tangent is worked out there. We've still got this error on this side. So G1, not surprisingly, G1 into here. Now this should be a lot closer to start with. Now we've only got it's down to 0.14, so by making that smaller we've got closer to a solution. Now before I said usually the best result on an edge like this into another surface is to delete the existing curve on surface and then use project, but sometimes edge will work, but I can't tell you when. It's one of those that you've just got to try. So let's just do G1 edge and just see if this works. Let's just do that. So it's not working at the minute. Maybe if I change the position influence down to 0, it might improve things, but no. But there are times when that works. It didn't make it any worse anyway. It's still 0.74, which is what it was before, I think. So let's just try. Let's just get rid of curve on surface there, and then this is going to throw this edge out. Of course, G1 project there, and I'm going to do it from the view. So it's actually made that worse, but let's just live with it. So now I can't remember. I think it was better when I've got that aligned. So it's an iterative process. There's no magic button that's going to give you this. So that's got down to 0.13. So that's dangerously close. This is aligned. So let's go with this. And then we're going to go and start moving CVs around again with lots of mouse sensitivity on. So the first one there is where the maximum error is. Now I've been moving this point normal to that surface. There is another way we could move this, which would have an effect, and that's to move it left to right, which if we moved it left to right by sliding it, then it has some effect on here, but doesn't have any effect, or very little effect on here, because we're not moving it up and down. So I could try that. I'm not holding out any hope really that this is going to have the effect that we want, but let's just try sliding that along. Now we probably have to put a lot less mouse sensitivity on that way, but sometimes that can affect things. But you can see I'm having to move it to a silly point there, which obviously we don't want, so it was worth a try. So let's go back to moving it normal, and I've got to put lots of mouse sensitivity on here so it slows it right down. And I'll do what I did before, which is try and sort of balance it. So I've got about 0.2 on both sides, and then we can move along here, see if we can push that down to where we want it to be. It seems to be going, hopefully, in the right direction. Now it's popped up a bit further along, but we just counter that by moving the next point along. We're still struggling. What I'm going to do on the lower edge is do the other way of doing this, the better way of doing this. I mean, part of the reason for showing you this is to show you how tricky this is and how you don't want to be doing this. But the thing that I am not showing you is that if this was G2, this would be a heck of a lot easier, especially if you just accept the fact that you want tangency there. You'll find it a lot easier. If you can do it with G1, then it'll stand you in good stead for being able to do it with G2. So I'm going to try and keep pushing that and pushing it until this goes here, and obviously this is gone off now. So we'll move that over here, see if we can just get rid of that. And then it moves even further away, but now we're almost there, I think. Oh, there must be a little spot there, 0.051, so we're almost there. Now if it starts to flick from one direction to the next, all you got to do is put more mass sensitivity in. So let's make that 5. I've made it 50,000. That's even better. That's probably too. If it's too slow, then obviously change that. So I accidentally put in 50,000, not 5,000. But that'll just slow it down enough that you can actually get it to work. So you think, oh, that's great, that's brilliant. It's not brilliant, but at least it's aligned. So you've now got a model that you can machine or that you can 3D print. If I look into this though, because this is going off at an angle here, what you'll find is these CVs are pretty nasty in here. You know, when you're doing A-class work especially. If you're doing a concept model, it doesn't matter really, but then if you were doing a concept model, you wouldn't be working to these tolerances. So we're looking at sort of A-class quality here, and that's not nice at all. Not much you can do about it. You might be able to massage those points up and down, but you'll still get a lump in here because of the fact that this is going across and this is coming off at an angle. You'll also see this in the highlights. But having said that, it's so small that we're actually down to the sort of tolerances of the highlights. in this area. We can change the tolerance there to 0, and we could make the tessellation accurate, but you're still, I mean, we're getting, that seems to be coming off at a funny angle there, and that's because that's just tangency. On this side we've got curvature, so it sort of flows a bit better, but this is what you'll get. You will get this. There's no, you can't avoid it. That's what you're going to get. So you can see it even from that angle. There's a sort of lump in the highlights there, but bearing in mind this is a tiny piece of geometry, you have to ask the question, does it actually matter? Now if it does matter, what I'm going to do on this end is try and do it a slightly different way. So what we want to do is flow this edge in, and I'm going to try and do it, I mean ideally it probably would want to go over here, but what you want to do is get an edge on this fillet here, which goes from, has to join up with that, has to tan into there, and then it comes off and ideally goes into about 90 degrees onto this corner here. So I'm actually going to create another layer here and just put these essential bits on here. So the only bits we're interested in here. So this is just a different way of doing it. And as I say, if this was coming on in at a less acute angle, if this was coming in down here, then definitely you'd want to flow that across. The sharper that angle is, the less inclined I am to do it. You just have to accept sometimes that you go across at an angle. And sometimes I've found the solution is to put a small surface in that side and a small surface in that side as well, to try and get this to align as best we can. So I'm going to delete these curves on surface here, as I did before. I'm going to delete this one as well, because I would need to extend this surface out. And I'm actually going to save this, which normally I'm saving this every 5 minutes. I'm being a bit lazy and not doing that. So what I want to do is extend this surface, and hopefully it'll go in the right direction. It's sort of deviating off a bit, and so I'm going to undo that. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to detach that surface. So we've got a not very small surface, but a smaller surface that we're going to use to extend. So I'm just going to go back to here, say. So I don't want it too small, because if you make it small, the tendency is that it's more likely you'll get a lump in the highlights. I've got rid of that curve on surface there. Now this one, if I want that to behave better, so let's just first of all put continuity on there, and yeah, because I haven't got a curve on surface there, I've got nothing to compare that with, but I know that that was actually aligned. So I should be able to just, with this one, I'm just going to project a curve on surface in that view. Onto this one with that one. And so I haven't done an alignment there. I just want to check that we've got G1 continuity there, which we have, which is no surprise because I detached it, which is 100% accurate. Now I want to extend this surface, and I might want to adjust the end of it. So let's go and extend that. Now if I extend that, you can see it sort of goes off a little bit there. It's pretty good. But sometimes the best solution, if you find it's going off a little bit, is to drop the degree right down. So I'm going to make that degree 3. In this case, it hasn't actually, I don't think it's going to make any difference, but sometimes you find that dropping the degree down, sometimes even the degree 2, means you have a more accurate result. Now this one has lost its continuity here. So I'm going to, we've got a curve on surface there. Now, lost the curve on surface there, haven't we? Have we or not? No, we haven't. We've actually got a curve on surface. It just goes all the way along there. So I can actually go and analyze that one. So what I'm going to do here is just align that in tangency. Is probably because I've dropped the degree of it. Well, it will be because of that. So I'm going to align that into that edge. I'm not going to create a new curve on surface. I'm just going to use edge, and I'm going to use position influence of 0, which just means the CVs stay more or less where they are. And the deliberate mistake I made there, which I always make, is to not put partial on. So if I put partial on, now it's got a perfect alignment, only it hasn't. And obviously that's because the degree's now gone too low. So if it doesn't work, I could try, let's go back to there, because I'd like to keep that as degree 3 if I can, and it's dangerously close. So the solution there is to just get rid of those curves on surface. So now I'm going to realign these edges. This one doesn't need realigning, it just needs projection of the edge as a curve on surface. So I can do, I always pick the wrong one, that one. So evaluate, and we want tangency on there, which should be no change there, and that means we don't have a curve on surface there because I've just projected only that edge, not this one. So this one I can use a line on, and that will create me a curve on surface. So G1, project, view, or normal would do the trick. So we've now got that aligned there. So now I want to extend this fillet this way. So I want to extend it quite a long way. I'm going to get rid of that locator, which is obviously wrong. So if we look at that one, if I go into the information window, you can actually see what it tells me, which is a load of rubbish, because obviously it's measuring between the two edges which aren't actually connected together. So I don't want that. I'm just going to delete it. Now what I do want to do, because this is deviating from this edge, I need this to join up here really, and maybe this isn't the best thing to do to extend that, to be honest. I think what I might do, well, what I will do is I'm going to put a curve in from here. So let's just get rid of that curve on surface. The trouble is with curves on surfaces, they are difficult to see, and so I couldn't remember whether I put a curve on surface there or not. If you look up here, you can see I haven't, but you can also put edit points on if you're in any doubt. But curves on surfaces are one of the common errors that people make. They produce multiple ones of them, not even realizing, and leave them lying around, and they cause havoc because you then end up measuring to them and you think, why is my surface not aligning? And it can be just you're picking up an old curve on surface. So I'm actually going to, let's just extend this backwards because it's not going in the right direction. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a curve from here to here. So I'm going to use edge point curve. I mean, you can use blend curves if you prefer. I've just gone off them, and I just like everything to work the same really, and of course edit point curves work the same as every other curve really, and in terms of having CVs on and so forth. So I'll make that degree 5, so then I can align that at both ends. Let's just take the CVs off there so we can see a bit clearer, and then I'm going to align that probably G2 at that end, because they're edges. It doesn't have to be G2 at all, of course, and it doesn't also matter whether I pick the edge or the curve on surface there. The important thing is make sure that you've got one arrow. That means you're on the end point there. Now I could just make that G1. All it is just to create something that's the right sort of shape. You can see that because we're crossing over this area that we do end up with this little bulge there, which ideally I'd want to get rid of, but just for the sake of speed I'm going to do it this way. Now notice that we've got a double arrow there, so even though I picked a curve on surface which should have gone to the end there, it doesn't seem to have done. So if I grab hold of that and move it to the left, now it's a single arrow, which means it's to the end. If you don't do that, then you're going to end up with all sorts of problems trying to align things. So I've got a curve there. I've also in effect got a curve on this edge here, because I can just, let's just go and duplicate that. So with duplicate on, one of the things that catches me out quite often is I'll have interactive on, which then instead of getting the edge, which is what I want, it'll find an isopalm. Again, this is if I do interactive and pick that edge, you can actually drag it down the surface, and if it's only microscopically out, it's going to be a problem. So what I want to do is not do that. So make sure interactive is off. That's another thing that can cause an error. So if I do that, it picks the edge, so I've got that curve there. and I don't really need this surface, to be honest. I might just template it. I'm going to just template it. If you're not quite sure, template it or put it in another layer, then I can get it back if need be. Now I need a curve on this edge as well, so let's duplicate that. So again, it doesn't really matter which side you pick. So I've got two curves there and I want to trim them back to each other there. So let's go into the trimming function, so trim to geometry. So I'm going to trim that curve there to that curve, and then this curve to that curve. Just make sure that I pick the right things. So I should have two curves there. If I highlight them, I can see them more clearly. And now I want to create a curve segment from this end to this point down here somewhere. I'm not sure where. So I'm going to go into edit point. Now we know that this is only tangent, so there's no reason for putting curvature on there at all, and degree 2 will do it. I don't tend to change the degree in the menu just because it's so easy to change it afterwards, so I'm just going to put something in there. I don't know where it's going to be exactly, and then I'm going to go into object edit. I'm going to align that G1 there into this curve, just see what we get, and then I can slide that along a little bit. Now this end here ought to come in, ideally ought to come in at 90 degrees, doesn't have to exactly, it can come at a little angle. I'm actually going to put in an extra CV there, so make that degree 3, and I'll explain why in a minute. On this end I want to put history on, and I want to put G1 on, because that means I can then slide it along that curve. So I've got history on there, slide that up and down, so I can actually make that coming in at more or less 90 degrees. The reason I've put in degree 3 here is because I need those CVs. I'm going to basically be taking that fillet surface there, and I want to do a trim convert on it to this curve here. Now if I do that, so let's go into our transform CV menu there. Actually, I'm just going to move those around freehand. Now, because I'm not in a particular orthogonal view, if I try and move that point, it's moving actually in the X direction, which might be fine. But if you find that's a bit of a pain, you can actually set up a plane here, which wouldn't be, might be quite a good idea anyway. But if I go into plane view and pick some point on the edge there or on the curve, whatever. So now I'm looking at that in that plane. Then I can move that point around with the left mouse button if I'm in the right function. So transform CV. Now I can move it anywhere I want to, which is more like it. So I need to really position it on this hull, more or less. There's no point in trying to make it 100% accurate because you can't really tell where it should be until you trim convert this. And then this one, I didn't put history on that end, I seem to remember, so I actually do need to put history on there. Well, it'd be just easier if I did. So I've got history on there, so I can slide that up and down. Sometimes you find that you can see, you know, the spacing there is quite big compared with down here because I'm trying to get that CV on this hull, and sometimes that can be quite problematic when you're doing this sort of thing. But here it seems like it might work. So I'm going to extend this surface this way. The reason I'm extending it is because I want to do a trim convert on it. If it's not extended, it may fail. It may not want to do it because it thinks that end point there is on this edge rather than this edge. So if I make it clear to the system that that's what I want to do, I can do it that way. So let's do a trim convert. Now the chances are this will probably screw up a bit, so let's do it anyway, see what we get. So if you want to be absolutely safe, keep originals on, so you can always get back to it. You see it moves the CVs up a bit. I've got view on. It doesn't end up quite where you might expect it to end up with that CV. The other thing is we've got far too many CVs now going this way, but we can change the degree in this menu if we wanted to. So that's probably more like it, or we can change it afterwards, it doesn't actually matter. So I've got the original one on there. I'm going to just template that, so you can see I've got a few templates there, which I'll get rid of later. This curve here might be an idea, probably is an idea. to get these CVs on this surface to sort of tie up with that. Maybe if I align it though, be careful because that curve isn't actually aligned in tangency to anything, but we can do that if we wanted to. So if I said object edit, we will have to manually tinker with these surfaces, I think, to get this to work. But if I align that, and I'm going to use edge, and it's got to be position influence 1, in other words the CV is exactly the same as the curve, and then I'll put blend on just so that it blends across there. It doesn't look too bad anyway, but obviously if I blend too far, it could destroy the curvature. It doesn't seem to have done that, but I wouldn't go that far. I'd just hold it there. Now if that's not quite the sort of shape you want, then we can always change that blend factor. In this case, if I change it down, it seems to be going the wrong way. I wanted it a bit more up in that direction. So we can, if we go on Alt, we can actually go and make that bigger rather than smaller, which might be what you want. Or you can just go and move some CVs around manually. I've got one on there, yeah. Now I've obviously in a line I've left history on, haven't I? Which is why nothing seems to be happening. One of the dangers of history, which is why sometimes you want to delete the history. Of course I've got to delete the history because it's now got history on it, and I want to delete the construction history there. So sometimes history can be fantastic. All I'm doing here now is just, and other times history can really get in the way. All I'm doing is just lining those CVs up so that they're a bit more equally spaced along there. That usually gives you a better result. Now one thing I did mention, and it's a good job we've got this plane here, so we're in that plane, is that that curve was not aligned to this surface. So I don't know whether we can see that if we shade it up, not really. But the beauty of having a plane there is if I can go back to that plane, or I can look at that geometry from any direction relative to that plane, so that's really good. I'm now going to save this because we've done quite a bit of work and I'm not really saving it very methodically, so save that again. Now because we've got a plane on, it makes alignment easy because we can just go into align, G1, project, rather than view. I mean I could use view here, but if I was in that view for example, then I can't use view, but what I can do is use Z. Z being Z of this plane. So whether I'm in the view or not, it doesn't actually matter. I can just align it relative to that plane. So really, really handy. And the same on this side. I can just do that relative to the plane. Now the fact that that's failed by 0.1 of a degree is not a worry, because we've got a fairly low degree here, so we can just increase the degree, and there we are, degree 5 has done it. Now let's have a shade of this and just see what we've got. So we've got this space here at the minute. We've got a curve down here, curve up here, edge, edge. So we've got enough to put in a surface there. There's two ways you could do this. I could actually just go back to my template, which was that one, and just do this. So we know that's aligned at the top edge. So I think I will do it this way. The other way would be to use square, but this is probably better because I'm using the original surfaces. Now we might have to change this edge here. So I've sort of aligned it to that curve, but that might change because you can see the CVs here are quite different to the CVs here. Or we might just decide to align this into there. It all depends on what looks best really. So with this surface in here, I'm just going to increase the degree. Let's make it 5. It's guesswork, you know, until you actually get to the point of actually trying to align it. We don't know what degree we need here. Again, I could use, rather than view, I could use Z of that plane. The fact that I'm in that plane or in that view of that plane means it actually makes no difference at all. So you can see the CVs of that are slightly different to the CVs of that curve. I'm going to get rid of that curve because it's going to add to confusion here. I also had original on. I'm going to get rid of that because I don't want that. I mean, worth going back into the menu actually, because if you don't normally want that on, then it's worth going back and just switching that off now. So I'm going to just check that that's aligned there, there and there. So let's go into, oh, I can't remember whether I've got curves on surface here or not. There's one there, isn't there? Yes, there is. So we can do an evaluate on that. We haven't got one in here. You can tell if I go and pick it with a surfcon function, that's another way of telling that we haven't got a curve on surface there. So let's go into Object Edit, Align, G1 Project. Don't want blending on. That's another thing that can catch you out if you've left that on from last time, and then you think, what's going on? It may be that you've left blending on. Also, I want to get rid of that curve, and I'll get rid of that one as well. So let's align that. So we're going to align it in Z or now. Guess the other thing is, of course, I forgot that I've extended that surface, but of course the lower edge doesn't join up with where we are. So actually, we don't want to do that. So let's revert that, and we'll first of all we've got to align this in position to that end. So now I'm doing it in position to start with, so I've got project on. It's given me an error, and I don't want project on anyway. Always want position on, always on those ends. Now I've put position on. I'm going to then see G1, see what that gives us. I'm not interested in whether it aligns or not. I'm just interested in the. So I'm actually going to take the diagnostic off for a minute. Oh, sorry, the continuity check there. Diagnostic is to tell you the deviation between that and the original when you've got the original on. So I'm putting G1 on just to see what happens to these CVs really, and they seem to be okay. And I know there's errors popping up, but that doesn't matter. You know, we can use non-proportional scaling if we want to, if we're interested in really looking at the quality of those CVs. And of course there's a bit of tidying up we could do on the CVs. I would say that this point actually ought to go up a bit so that we get a better flow of CVs across here. Also, well actually before we do that, I suddenly noticed that we've got skew on here, and that was probably from last time, or it's decided that it wants skew on. Now why is it not updating? Because I've got auto update on. That's better. So you can see that that's pointing downwards there. Now what would be useful here, so this one doesn't look too bad. I think, you know, that point there could come down a little bit, but that looks okay. It has to S from that position to this position. It's got to do it somewhere, so that's fine. This one just goes bleh. It doesn't look very good at all. Blend would spread that a bit. We could spread it onto those points, but I don't think that's going to help either. I think this actually needs to go up a tiny little bit, because we're aligning it in tangency to a very small surface. The smallest error there will have a big impact on this side. If I put create history on, and then we go and move CVs around, so I'm going to put on quite a lot of mouse sensitivity 10, and I'm just going to move that point because that looks a bit high anyway. You can see that point comes up, and I only have to move this a tiny amount for that to be better. The fact that the tangency is improving there is just weird. Useful but weird. It's good, but for quite strange. I think this one's now, that's probably about as low as it wants to go in terms of the angle, but if you look through there, I think that point, probably that point, make sure I pick the right surface, needs to go up a bit in terms of looking at that in relation to that. Now I'm not really looking at the right hand surface, but I can see that that's gone a bit too high. So I mean, bizarrely, that's given us tangency matching. There is no logic to that whatsoever, because the system's obviously doing a recalculation every time, because I've got history on there. So it must be moving this CV around by a tiny amount, which is not even noticeable. Because normally if I'm working down here, you would not expect that to change at all, or the tangency to go better. Now I want to bring that down, bring that up rather, just so that the flow of CVs across there looks better, and I think that's it. Like I say, you could tweak these if you wanted to, because that one looks a bit high. I'm moving it by sliding it along the hole there between those two CVs, because that affects the tangency very little when you slide that along. As long as you slide it along that direction, not that direction. So I think that's more than good enough for what we're doing. So I'm going to come out of non-proportional view. Now that's not aligned, but it doesn't worry me. It's a small angle change. So we can now go into align. This one we've got a curve on surface, so I will go and try and use edge here, and I'm going to put vector on. Very important. We try and keep these CVs relative to this view all the time now. So it says there's history involved. I want to get rid of the history. Actually, let's just go and pick all of those surfaces and say delete construction history. Otherwise, that gets us into trouble 9 times out of 10. You know, if you want the history on, then it's good. So, but not when you don't. So edge vector Z. So that means those CVs are only moving in and out of the view, or the Z direction of our plane. Let's go and put surfcon on there. Now this one definitely isn't aligned. I know that. Now I wouldn't. I know I was aligning that in tangency that way, but normally you would do it the other way, and I was only doing that because I couldn't be bothered to do it the other way. There was no real logic to it. I could have done exactly what I did before by moving that point rather than that point, probably a better solution, but I chose to do it that way. But if you're actually trying to get this alignment in, so that's the only edge that hasn't got alignment on it, then you want to align this to that. It's always the best thing to do, is to always align the small surface to the large one, unless there's a reason otherwise. Now on this one, again, as we've had before, the angle goes out here. This isn't aligned by 0.14, that's 0.26. So they're quite small values, and they should disappear gradually as we chip away at this. So let's first of all increase the degree. We could increase it to 7. There's no reason why not. But having said that, it didn't seem to make that much difference. So what I could try is increasing the degree the other way, because often these little surfaces need this. And we could do it in both directions. You can see if I make that 7 by 7, we're very, very close actually. So that might be, given that we've got G1 there and G1 here, I've just made a mistake, haven't I, here? I assume it must be aligned, even though I haven't actually looked at it at all. I need to project that. So again, we use project G1 Z on here into here. I've got a continuity check on there. That's better. So let's try that again, because I forgot to actually align that edge in. So this one, I must switch to edge. It was strange because that was still tangency there, which is odd considering that wasn't tangency, but it's another strange thing, much like when I was moving that point down here and this tangency improved, which made no sense at all. But we're always happy to take those strokes of good luck. You can see the angle there is 0.07, so it's nothing. I'm just wondering if we can, it's always best to have the smallest degree you can, and I'm just wondering whether we could, only because if you want to change anything, but I think we'll just go with 7 by 7. I think the key thing is that because we've only got tangency here and tangency here, not G2, normally if that was G2 and that was G2, I'd pretty much expect that to be degree 5 across there and have no problem. We probably wouldn't need to increase the degree, but here, because we've only got tangency there, I think it's perfectly acceptable. So this one is so small. Now this is where you have to make a judgment. You know, should we divide this up? Should we make this smaller like we did the other one, or should we manually move it? And people, I think sometimes people are scared of manually moving CVs around, when in fact, if you get used to the idea, it's not that scary, and sometimes it's the quickest way of doing anything. So I'm going to put loads of mouse sensitivity on. That's probably a bit too much. Let's make it 1000. And this is all guesswork. You just, you know, if you want to move that point, just see what happens. So I need to move that point. That's where it's telling me the error is, and of course I know that's probably going to break the tangency that way. But if I've got a very high value in there, I'm only moving a tiny amount. So I move it one way and it's increasing it. I move it the other way and it's decreasing it. And hopefully I'll get down to 0.05 without affecting the other side. Now you can see it's just broken there. So let's just undo that. So I'll just use Control Z. I'm just going to go to this next point, which affects that side but doesn't affect that side, and see if we can get rid of it that way. You can see that's, you know, I could have done a lot more work of detaching those and then realigning it. If you get used to the idea of moving CVs sometimes to get these final bits down, then it's so much quicker. I mean, if that angle was like 3 degrees, no way would I be looking at moving the CVs. But if it's like 0.1, 0.2 maybe, then I'll look at the CVs, see if I can see if a few short, you know, quick movements of it look like it's going in the right direction. If I think it's good, maybe increase the degree if you can, then that's what I'll go with. And there we had such a small degree, 0.07, that, you know, it was no question really that that was going to work. Now the other thing that we'll notice here, or hopefully we'll notice, is that if you remember the one at the top that we did, which I think was L2, probably not, I think my numbering of layers was wrong. This one, if you recall, as we go over this junction where the angle comes off really sharply, our CVs are doing this sort of thing, which is not nice. Doesn't look good in the highlights. Now this one should be better. Might not still be perfect because I've not looked at those CVs, but actually let's squash that up and let's have a look at that a bit in more detail. So you can see those CVs look pretty smooth. You know, that does go up a little bit, but that's I think that's all down to this tangency thing, and you know, we could improve the CVs if we really wanted to. Depends on how important that is to the job that we're working on. But what we should also find then, as a result of that, the CVs being tidier, that our highlights going across there should be better. So you can see that that looks pretty smooth. Although I haven't actually even tried to align that in curvature. I mean, it could be possible. Probably unlikely. Well, you can see the curvature here, where we haven't got any spikes. That's saying that's okay, apart from that end spike. So actually, all the way along here, which is what we're seeing in the highlights. Actually, the highlights look pretty smooth across there. This break here is because we've got tangency only, so that's what you always get. Where you've got curvature alignment, you always get smooth highlights. Now this one says it's within tolerance, and so, but there's a little tiny step in it, and it's just to do with the accuracy of the diagnostics at this level. I think if this geometry was bigger, because this is tiny geometry, then you'd expect the graphics to be able to cope with it. But when you get down to this scale, sometimes the graphics doesn't show you exactly what's there, but the fact that it says curvature continuity means that that's pretty much curvature aligned. Of course, the tolerance we are working to is 0.1 for curvature. If you set it to 0, then that wouldn't be green, and if you could make it green, then your highlights would be absolutely 100%. But 0.1 seems to be the industry standard. I've not worked anywhere where that isn't the case. So this is definitely the solution to go for, rather than the other option, if we can. So I'll just change that to tangency. I'm just going to save that. But as I say, sometimes the angle there, this one we could have done exactly the same with, but I just wanted to show you how difficult it is if you don't do that, and how, you know, relatively it's a little bit more construction to build that, but you just get a better result.